Hello, it's Thursday morning. That means Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter are here. Today, we're going to talk about the Ukraine collapse. Drone and missile warfare is changing the game. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Scott Ritter. And the important thing that you're going to need to do before anything else, before we get into anything else, is you're going to need to go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com. For all of you that see Scott on all of the various platforms, but many of you don't know that he has this site and that you can go there. You can find all of Scott's good work. And even more importantly, you can help Scott continue. Go to scottritterextra.com. Make sure you donate. Make sure you do everything you can to help Scott Ritter. And last but not least, there are those of us right now, particularly as difficult as things are, who may not have the money, may not have anything to contribute to the cause. But what you can do is you can go on Twitter, you can go on all your social media platforms, you can share scottritterextra.com. And when you share it, make sure you do what I'm doing now. You send a message when you share it with the post that says, hey, go here for Scott Ritter's work, and make sure you donate. We got to keep Scott going. We got to keep this important work going. It could help to save the lives of all of us. Think about as the Republican, as the politicians always say, it's about the children. Think about the children and their future. We want them to have one. scottritterextra.com. All right, Scott, let's start here. We have, who was it? The famous, there was a famous quote where a guy, that was said that he was dead. And he said something like, my demise has been greatly exaggerated.
Right. News of my demise has been, yeah.
Well, okay. For I don't know how long everybody's been trying to predict, when Ukraine's going to collapse. Because we've been using this term from the beginning, collapse. Just like a tree, at some point, you're chopping a tree down, and at some point it gets to the point where you hear it start. If you've ever cut a tree down, you hear that crackling, crack, crack, crack. You're like, oh, everybody run, get out of the way. Crackle, 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 boom, right? And why is it? Because you chunked away. The Russian way of fighting, boom, bit by bit, chunk by chunk. And at some point, Scott, I think we're starting to hear that crackle that you hear on a tree along the front line. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, one of the most difficult things to do in the intelligence business is predictive analysis. I used to do it for a living. I was pretty good at it, but I had the benefit when I was doing it for a living of having access to an intelligence cycle that in many cases I controlled. So I can, so I wasn't just sitting there receiving information. I was directing, I was collecting, I was evaluating, assessing, redirecting. And because of the intimate familiarity I had with the totality of the picture, I was able to make some pretty accurate predictions. Now, when you leave the business, you lose your security clearances and you lose access to, the real-time, real-world intelligence. You start getting heavily filtered information. And you're likewise, again, back when I was in the game, I oftentimes was forward deployed where I could personally see things. And now, you and I are both back here in the rear with the gear. I'm sitting at a desk in Del Mar, New York, thousands of miles removed, working through. Now, the thing that I can bring from my previous experience is patterns of behavior, a knowledge of how systems work, et cetera. So I can extend, this foundational knowledge, extend it out and make some informed guesses about what's happening. The reason why I bring that up is, to be honest, I'm sort of getting tired of people saying, well, you said this. Yeah. And what's your point? It's predictive analysis. It ain't a crystal ball. I'm not all powerful and all seeing to look through and do this. Assessments are made based upon the data that comes in. What I will say this, the tree's going to fall. All right. Get over it, people. If I didn't call the tree falling last week, if I said it's going to fall 2 weeks ago and it falls a week from now, I ain't wrong. The tree's going to fall. That we know. We try to make the notion of this more relevant and such by putting a timeline on it, but that timeline isn't attached to anything real. To give you an example, we don't know what the Russians are going to do. When we started making discussions about the collapse of Ukraine, we didn't know what kind of assistance Ukraine was going to get. We didn't know how that assistance would be either interdicted or otherwise attrited, in what form it would get to the front lines. We didn't know what the Russian plans were. We didn't know any of this, all the details you need to know to make really good predictive analysis. All we knew is you have a tree, and the tree had cuts made into it, and a back cut was being done. And we're hearing a crack, and we can say that tree is going to fall. Now, we can't tell you when it's going to fall exactly, but it is going to fall. And that's what we've been saying. The tree's falling right now. I agree with you. Now, people are going to say, well, Scott, when exactly is the tree going to fall? I don't know, but we can make informed speculation. Again, it comes down to one thing that I haven't been wrong on ever. And that's military math, especially when we get into wars of attrition. Because, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, and I'm not one, but I am somebody who has planned wars and fought wars and seen the consequences of wars. I'm pretty damn good at military math. But again, you don't have to be a genius to know that if you start off with relative parity, and one side is consuming itself quicker than it can be replenished, and the other side is building up its power quicker than it can be consumed, that eventually you're going to get an unbalanced correlation of forces. Again, it doesn't take rocket science to figure this one out, ladies and gentlemen. And then when you have that, you can make certain assumptions, such as the side that has more military power is going to prevail over the side that has less military power. Now, we can get into cute things such as qualitative analysis of the weapon systems involved. We can get into qualitative analysis of the troops involved, training, leadership, command and control, all this kind of stuff, which, by the way, I do. And that only further refines the conclusion that the Russians are going to win. And I've been saying from day one, the Russians are going to win. It's inevitable. The tree is going to fall. When it's going to fall, and for what purpose? Are the Russians clearing trees and they're just going to dump those trees, throw them out? Are they going to take the trees and turn them into pulp to make paper? Are they going to take the trees to a lumber mill, saw them up to make a house? We don't know. The Russians haven't announced it, but the tree's going to fall. The forest is going to be cleared. Ukraine will be defeated. It's happening as we speak. But now we have some more certainty because the Russians are starting to finally fill in the blanks that people like Garland and I don't know, Garland, do you speak Russian?
Very little.
All right. And my Russian, I might have more words than you, but when I put them together, it'll sound incomprehensible. So you probably speak better Russian than me. My point I'm trying to make is that Garland and I, who aren't fluent in the Russian language, aren't communicating with Russian generals and politicians on a daily basis. We're smart enough at least to, be able to put the picture together. But the Russians are starting to come out and say what they're going to do. We know a couple things. One, they're going to clear the whole damn forest. All the trees are coming down. Now, they're going to build them into planks, and they want to rebuild Ukraine. The Russians have committed now to the strategic defeat of Ukraine. That means there's not going to be all the people out there hoping for a Korea-type scenario, a demilitarized zone, North and South, perpetual war. Ain't going to happen. And the Russians are confident now to say that because They don't have to worry about the chainsaw running out of gas or the axe blade getting too dull, or they don't have enough wedges to put in there to push it over. Tree's cracking, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to fall. You can't stop it. The tree is falling. It just takes a little bit of time for the momentum to come in. So it's done. The Russian ambassador to the United Nations said the West has to get ready for the uncomfortable truth that this war doesn't end with anything less than Ukraine's unconditional surrender. There's no negotiation. There's not going to be a peace plan. There's not going to be any of that. Ukraine will be strategically defeated. The timeline, sooner rather than later. Russians have always been loath to put a timeline on things, always said we're not driven by the calendar, we're driven by results. But now Russians are starting to say it's over, not only by the end of this year, they're saying August. And here's the interesting part. All those Western pundits who were screaming, Ukraine's going to win, Russia's losing, they're saying it's over by August, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at what's happening right now. We are seeing a situation. Look, a lot of focus right now is on what's going on in Washington, D.C. with this, with the Ukraine aid package and things of that nature. Will it pass? Won't it pass? Will Johnson survive? Won't he survive? I'll just make this really easy. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. It might provide a morale boost to Ukrainians who are in Kiev, who will say, oh, at last we got the aid we need. But everybody knows that the majority of that money will never go to Ukraine. It just goes to building weapons to go back into our arsenal. So this is about enriching the military industrial complex of the United States. It's not about helping Ukraine. The money that does go help Ukraine, a lot of it is for new construction. That takes time. And so they're never going to see it because they won't be here in August. There is a couple $2 billion that is immediate cash infusion for continuance of government. But this is the most corrupt. If you have the most corrupt government in the world, which the Ukrainian government is, and when they receive, I don't know if the aid package says, 10% for the big man when it goes in there or something like that, but there's a lot of percentages. There's a lot of big men, middlemen, little men that are stealing money from this money. That's in the best case scenario. Imagine being Ukraine, knowing, because they know that you're going to die, that you're going to fall. And all you're doing is hanging on until the last second when you can run. But the purpose of hanging on is to stuff as much money in your pocket. So when that money goes into Ukraine, do you really think any of it's going to go to the pensions of those deserving retired people in Ukraine? Do you really think it's going to go to fund this, that, and the other social activity? Or what's the odds that all of that money disappears into the pockets of the corrupt Ukrainians hanging on for that last infusion of cash before they flee the country? So none of this aid package is going to help Ukraine. It's not going to help at all. You can't change the fact the tree is going to fall. The forest is going to be cleared. The Russians have total domination of the battlefield. The Ukrainians don't have air defense worthy of the name. The Russians strike whatever target they want. They have very good intelligence, so good that when the northern military district of Ukraine decides to hold a meeting, a gathering to talk about how we're going to organize for the defense of the northern part, the Russians found out and put not one, not two, but 3 Iskander missiles on the target, killing them. And that's happening over and over and over again. Ukrainians can't meet. They can't gather. They can't organize. All they can do is die, and they're dying at extraordinarily high numbers. They can't hold anything on the front outside of Chasiv Yar, where there's big fighting going on right now. The Ukrainians put in their 3 best units. They're fire brigades that have reliably been there in the past. You know them, the 3rd Assault Brigade that used to be called Azov. Yeah, they're the Nazis. These are the fanatics. The 67th Mechanized Brigade. That used to be the right sector's thugs that used to run around and beat people up. They organized them into a mechanized brigade. The 25th Airborne Brigade. That's all the other Nazis they stuff in there. These 3 brigades were sent into battle. The 25th is surrendering. They got to the front lines and went, we give up. We don't want to die. We're quitting. So they're being disbanded as we speak. The 67th went, we ain't even moving there. And the third, the Azov guys, the Nazis, the fanatics, they went, not only aren't we moving there, we're moving away from there. We're done. We're finished. We're not fighting your war anymore. And this is what's happening. The Ukrainian military is losing combat cohesion. Now, we've been talking about, collapse for some time now. Just in case for all you people out there that didn't understand what that means. Collapse is a process. All right. You start again. Let's talk about a rope. We have a rope holding, a line here. And that rope's a thick hemp rope. The process of collapse begins when Garland and I take a knife and start shaving it. See, that's the process of collapse because we're weakening that rope. And so what the Russians have been doing is shaving the rope. Now, what the Ukrainians have been doing is getting aid in the form of thread that they come into places where we shaved and they're wrapping the rope, trying to repair it. And so we're shaving, they're wrapping. Collapse is when we shave more than they can wrap. The rope starts to get weak. And at some point in time, smart people look and say the tensile strength of that rope, the ability to maintain the cohesion of that line is starting to fray. And eventually the thread count is going to be too low to hold it, and it's going to snap. And then when that happens, the whole thing comes down and everything you were trying to hold back pours through. That's about to happen. Scott, when? I don't know, but soon, because it can't. When you're looking at everything we've predicted is happening right now. The whole thing's coming down. There's no cohesion. There's no nothing. The Russians are literally blowing things up at will. But the Russians have decided, because understand this, the Ukrainians have learned a lot from the Russians. They have very heavy minefields. Why don't the Russians just rush through? Because they don't want to die. So they're just not going to go, hey, let's go, boom, on a mine. Russia is not in the business, contrary to what the British intelligence and the Western media says. Russia's not in the business of human wave assaults and throwing lives away. So their attacks are very deliberate. They're designed to reduce Russian casualties, maximize Ukrainian casualties. The other thing the Ukrainians are doing, and again, this comes into some discussions we had in the past about the new face of war, is they're just flooding the zone with drones. They're just flooding the zone with drones. And no one has come up with an adequate solution to the first-person view drone. I don't know how many videos you've seen of the drone chasing the guy around, and I feel sorry for the guy, even though some of the times he's a Ukrainian, because how do you think you feel? You're up there and this drone's coming in and you can't do anything. You can fire your weapon at it, but that's difficult. It's a small bullet drone, tough to hit. Your heart's beating, you're breathing, you're missing, the drone's coming closer. You start to run and the drone operator's just playing games with it. It's like a cat playing with a mouse. I have 2 cats. They go in the field right now, spring, thaw, mice are coming out. And every once in a while I see them down there with the paw on the mouse and they let it go and they hit it again. The drone operators playing with these people like a cat playing with a mouse, and eventually they get tired, dive in, bam, you're dead. If the Ukrainians are very good drone operators, and when they flood the zone with drones, it creates a problem for the Russians. So the Russians have to pause, step back, and come in with a counter-drone strategy that takes time to develop. You have to gather the intelligence, you have to bring the resources in to target in a timely fashion, and then you can push forward. So these things all add up to Russia's slow, deliberate movement forward. But it is inexorable. It can't be stopped. It won't be stopped. And eventually, there won't be anything in front of them. And they'll just keep going. That's where we are right now. That's what's happening today. And no amount of aid from the West can stop that. They can cause problems. Look, if Ukraine gets ATACMS missiles, some of them are going to make it to the front. Some of them are going to be fired. Some will hit their targets. They will kill Russians. But it won't change the outcome. Nothing's going to change the outcome. They could even drop the Kerch Bridge, which they keep saying they want to do. It won't change the outcome. Well, it will, because the Russians will take the planks that they were holding aside to rebuild Ukraine, and they'll pulp them. I talked to a Ukrainian politician who fled Ukraine after 2014, and he's now part of the government in exile, waiting. And they consult with the Russian government. He said that what they're pushing for is for Russia to call it quits when it comes to territorial acquisition, meaning that Russia will not take any more territory than just Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk. That's now forever part of the Russian Federation, never will change. But there's been a lot of people saying that Russia's going to take Odessa.
I believe they would. I believe they will.
Pardon?
I believe they'll take Odessa.
Well,
I would.
No,
But go ahead.
I share that opinion. But this guy who sits in the planning council said that, one of the scenarios is that Ukraine makes the decision to survive, and that the terms of their survival, in addition to complete denazification, complete demilitarization, is that they will get to keep Odessa, they'll get to keep Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, Kharkov, because these are industrial viable places. These are absolutely necessary for Ukraine to survive as a modern nation state. But in exchange, Ukraine will become part of a political economic union with Russia and Belarus. That means that in perpetuity, Ukraine will never go to the West, never go to the EU, never join NATO, nothing. It will always be permanently attached to Russia. But this allows Russia to rebuild Ukraine's industrial base, knowing that that industrial base will now be plugged into the Russian economic machine. Remember, Ukraine, the Donbass, Ukraine used to be called the heartbeat of the Soviet Union. And it can become that heartbeat again. And the Russians, if you had this union, would allow it to. It can't do that if it doesn't have Odessa, if it doesn't have Kharkov, if it doesn't have Dnipropetrovsk. So that's one scenario. But if the Ukrainians want to fight to the bitter end and compel Russia to come in and sacrifice more, then Russia's going to carve off those territories, absorb those territories, and what's going to be left is a permanent rump state. It'll become an agricultural adjunct of Russia. So they'll grow grain, it'll be added into the Russian grain and all that, but it'll never be a thriving, vital, industrial-based nation again. It will always be a minor agricultural player in a larger, and they'll still be part of the Union. Russia ain't letting Ukraine go. I just want people to know that. It's over for Ukraine. It's finished. There will never be an independent Ukraine again. They blew that. They had the opportunity for that back at the Istanbul Communique in April 22. They've had the opportunity to add it up until recently. This new decision by Russia to say it's over, we're finishing it, we're driving the stake into the heart of the vampire, means that there will never be an independent Ukraine. Russia always left the door open for an independent Ukraine. Always. And the terms of the Istanbul Communique were always on the table. It's Ukraine that turned their back on it. It's the West that turned their back on it. And Russia has made that decision now that that's off the table. And all that's left for Ukraine to do is die.
I noticed something, a while back, everybody was talking, the Brits and the French are talking about sending a couple of brigades and to Odessa and, sweep into Russia and probably end up, planting a French flag in Red Square before the summer's over, right?
Yeah.
Notice that Macron has shut his baguette eating yap over the last couple of weeks. He ain't saying nothing. No more talk of troops going. No, none of that. He is mums the word. There's radio silence coming out of Paris. What do you think about that?
Well, I've been speaking about this. When I talk, some people might have noticed that sometimes I get emotional, and sometimes I get angry, and I say things. And that's the last thing you want to be when you're doing cold, hard analysis. When you do analysis, you want to be totally objective and have no stake in the game. But I'm irritated by the policies of my country in France, etc., because I've been around long enough. There's people today that don't remember the Cold War, don't remember the consequences of the Cold War and what the potential results of a hot war at that time would have been. And I participated and helped bring to fruition the rapprochement between the Soviet Union and the United States. I lived through the time where we put the horror of the potential of war behind us, and we're actually looking forward to, peace. We talked about the peace dividend back then. How can we bring in the peace dividend after so many decades of investment in the Cold War? And then I watched us throw it away. And now I'm watching us rebuild a Cold War and begin it all over again. But I'm at least back in the Cold War, we had the courage to put people like me in uniform and put us on the front line so that if we ever fought a conflict with the Russians, American blood would be shed in a great deal, huge amounts, oceans of it. But we put our money where our mouth was. Today, we have politicians talking about, this aid package is the best investment ever. You see, we put all this money in there and enable the Ukrainians to kill Russians, and we don't pay a price. It's a fraction of our defense budget. We're killing Russians, and we don't put any of our people at risk. And so I was on doing an interview the other day, and I said, look, deterrence, because we've been talking a lot about deterrence when we talk about Israel, Iran, and what's going on there. I said, deterrence means that people have to understand that the consequences they're going to pay for their actions are tenfold greater than any benefit they might get from doing what they want to do. France said they want to send troops to Ukraine, and they did. They sent troops, and they sent advisors attached to artillery pieces, which Macron bragged about that he was sending. And then Russia proceeded to kill them all. They're already dead. They went into Ukraine. Russia found them. Russia killed them. And Macron is furious. But the Russians have let him know that that is the fate of every single Frenchman that enters Ukraine. We'll kill them all. No mercy. None whatsoever. And I say that Russia has to do that to every foreigner that steps in. I believe that Russia should take out every diplomatic mission that goes in. I think Russia should kill Zelensky, kill the Ukrainian parliament, kill everybody, because the time of being nice is over. All that happens now is that the West is going to seek to pour in resources to a confused criminal Ukrainian enterprise for the sole purpose of killing Russians, and that Russia needs to establish a deterrence policy.
Let me add this.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's going to happen is about 80% of it's going to get stolen by the oligarchs. They're going to send money in. This is the last load of laundry. You know what I mean? They are money laundering, and they're like, we got any dirty clothes left? Give me another basket of laundry. There you go. They're getting another $60 million basket of laundry, and they're going to launder $60 billion, and if they get it, and they're going to launder it right into their filthy, stinking pockets.
100%. But even then, we still haven't deterred. Russia hasn't. There's no deterrence in place. Russia needs to establish a deterrence policy that tells all of the allies of Ukraine that if you provide aid, we will bring so much harm to the aid providers that you'll get no gain out of this. Especially when the stated goal is to reduce casualties, to eliminate the risk of casualties on the part of the West. We've been getting a free ride. We have hundreds of American soldiers. And as an American, the last thing I want is a dead American soldier. Last thing I want. But as a human, I say you can't engage in a policy where your actions empower a certain group to kill others and believe that the group that you're killing can't be allowed to hold you accountable for it in the same fashion with the same results that you're trying to achieve. Deterrence means that every American that sets foot in Ukraine must die. End of story.
Anybody from NATO, every piece of
every
equipment,
NATO
every
person. Because right now they're getting a free pass. The Russians are letting these people send these delegations in, let them wander the streets of Kiev. The Americans send these military advisory groups in there. They hang out in the embassy. Then they go out at night and they drink in cafes and they run around with Ukrainian women and they have this great life. It's the party life in Kiev. It's party central. There can be no more parties in Kiev. And I'm here to say right now, if you're an American and in Ukraine, get the hell out or stay in the embassy. But don't think that you can wander in this place when the purpose of your presence in Ukraine is to facilitate the deaths of Russian soldiers. Because Russia, at some point in time, and they've done that with the French. And this is why Macron's silent, because the Russians said, you sent French soldiers in. We told you not to send French soldiers in. We have killed your French soldiers. We have destroyed your French artillery. And if you want to, we can do this all day. And they need to do that for everybody, because only then will Ukraine, this is actually a policy that will lead to saving Ukrainian lives. Now, I know that's the exact opposite of what, Lindsey Graham, fight to the last Ukrainian type people want. But the way you save Ukrainian lives is to remove the false promise of hope. See, right now, Ukraine labors under the perception that the West likes them, that the West wants to help them, that the West will help them, and that gives them a chance for victory. The tree's going to fall. You can't stop it. You can come in with all the super glue you want, and the tree's still going to fall. It's called physics. And so that's the situation we're at right now. Is we have to start thinking about how to save Ukrainian lives. We have to start thinking about the future of Ukraine. One day this war will end, and I'll tell you this as Americans too. One day this war will end, and Russia will have won, and Russia's going to win a huge strategic victory. Now, Russia has no intention of marching on Poland, the Baltics, or anything else. What they want to do is live in peace, but we've made it impossible for Russia to live in peace with us as friends. How do we become the friends of Russia? All you Americans out there that have supported the Biden administration's policy, all of you who are pushing for this thing, imagine when this war is over, because it will be over, and now the trees have all fallen, because they will fall, and now you're sitting at the table with the Russians saying, oops, we'd like to be friends. But the person you're sitting across from buried a son, buried a father, buried a brother, knows somebody who buried a son, a father, a brother, somebody who lost people because you insisted on giving the Ukrainians weapons to kill Russians. And the Russians are going to look at you, and they aren't going to be looking at you saying, yeah, we want to be friends with you. They're going to look at you and say that's everything we can do in our power not to kill you, not to reach across the table and throttle you, because you're a murderer. You facilitated murder. And that's what's happening right now. We're facilitating murder, not just of Russians, but of Ukrainians in huge numbers. We're the most immoral people on the earth, the most immoral, and we're the most cowardly. Again, you want to kill Russians? Put American boots on the ground. Have the courage to do that. Mobilize the entire National Guard and send them marching on to Ukraine. At least have the courage to do that. But we don't have the courage to do that. Lindsey Graham doesn't have the courage to do that. Joe Biden doesn't have the courage to do that. The U.S. military doesn't have the courage to do that because it's a suicide trip. But the point is, we're the most cowardly, immoral people on the planet, because all we want to do is sit back here in the comfort of our home and send money and resources to Ukraine so that they can kill Russians, knowing that the tree is still going to fall, the Ukrainians are still going to lose, and yet we're going to keep that process going. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to sit down with the Russians someday. We need to define the terms of that engagement right now by starting to do the right thing. And the right thing is to recognize the error of our ways. We're always good afterwards. You know, Garland, you and I are the same age. You remember when Vietnam fell, and you had every guy writing books. If we had only done this, if we had only done that, if we had only done this, if we had only done that, we could have won that war. We could have done this, that, and the other thing. But eventually, the further we get from the event, rational thinkers come in and say, you know, we should have probably listened to Ho Chi Minh back when we were working with him to fight the Japanese, and trusted him. And what would have happened if we had embraced Ho Chi Minh and worked with him to get the French out of Indochina? Because the French eventually left Indochina. That's the problem that's the problem with bad policy, is it never succeeds. So if your policy is to keep the French in China, that's bad policy. History showed that. What if we had good policy up front and told the French, get the hell out of China? We're going to work with this Ho Chi Minh character and build up a free and independent Vietnam that's going to integrate with us and be on our side. That eventually happened. Look at Vietnam today. U.S. relations in Vietnam are great. We could have had that good policy up front and done it right. Eventually, I'm just telling you right now, we're going to have to be friends with the Russians. Mm-hmm. I'd like us to be friends with the Russians today. Jump to the end and not go through all the horror that's in between. So all the people today that are saying this, that, and the other thing about Russia, you're wrong. You're fundamentally wrong. All the people are saying this, that, and the other thing about Ukraine in terms of support, you're wrong. You're fundamentally wrong. You could have saved Ukraine a lot of headache early on if you just said you're not going to join NATO. Could have saved a whole bunch of headaches, because newsflash, Ukraine will never join NATO. We knew that then. Why not just let it happen naturally? Why do we have to go through this whole sequence of events that have killed so many people, caused so much harm, done so much damage? Someday we're going to have to sit down with the Russians. And I'd like it to be a more comfortable conversation than what it's likely to be.
Well, I got a little video I'm going to show everybody. It's kind of a metaphorical video, right? And a lot of people have probably seen it. And it is in Australia. And this is to me, this represents Iran and Israel. Israel. They blew things up, terrorist attacks, blew up there one thing after the other, and they pushed Iran one time too many. Here's a metaphorical incident that many people may have seen. The little skinny kid is Israel, and the big kid in this is Iran. Check it out.
In Australia, a bullying victim has become an internet hero after he turned the tables on his tormentor. Take a look.
It was all picking on the big kid.
Monday. Casey Haynes, the bigger boy on the right, is seen being punched several times by a smaller boy. Suddenly, though, Casey just body slams the other boy and sending the other boy scampering off. The video's gone viral, and a Facebook page supporting Casey has more than 45,000 fans.
Well, Scott, let me just say.
I don't mean to laugh, but
you got to laugh. This kid, the big kid, taught the little kid a valuable lesson. He may have saved his life later on in life. He taught him, you're screwing around with this guy. He's trying to be nice. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. Finally, the kid pushes it too far, and he picks the kid up. And as they used to say in WWF, he gets the Slammy Award. He gets the Slammy Award. If that was my son that got slammed and I saw that video, I'd say, we should go thank that kid. We should go thank that kid.
It's an invaluable lesson. Yeah.
That was Israel. They're going to poke. They're going to push. And finally, Iran said, you know what? We've had enough. Here's the interesting part. Israel then says, we're like, are they going to strike back? Israel then says, we're going to hit them hard. And then Israel says, okay, we're going to hit them. And then Israel says, well, we'll do something else. And Iran says on more than one occasion, if you touch us, the slightest little thing, if you even hit our interest somewhere else, we are going to punish you mercilessly. Now, this is a dangerous situation, but I think at some point, Iran figured, look, if we don't slam this kid, I'm going to come to school every day. He's going to punch me. He's going to kick me. He's going to take my lunch money. He's going to bug me. And at some point, the answer is no more. And I think that's what we're looking at, Scott.
Yeah, the interesting thing is there's a lot of commonality in how the United States portrays the Russian threat with how we portray the Iranian threat. History shows that neither the Russians nor the Iranians are in the business of invading their neighbors. History shows that the fight that's being picked by the United States with Russia and Iran is a fight where the United States has to travel a long way away from their home to pick a fight with somebody right on their front, right in their doorstep. That's like me, Garland, driving all the way to where you live, knocking on the door and saying, I'm upset with you because you're threatening me. And you're like, dude, I'm at home. Go home. Leave me alone.
I'm looking through the peephole. Oh, who's that out there? Who's that out there?
Why are you here? You're threatening me. Scott, I'm at home. How can I threaten you? You exist. That's the problem. And so we've portrayed Russia as being this threat. What we've done is mirror imaged our policy of aggression, expansion, et cetera, onto Russia, and we're feeding it back to ourselves. We've done the same thing with Iran. Iran's not an expansive power. There was a time, and the Iranians will concede this. I've spoken to Revolutionary Guard commanders who admit this. Early on in the revolution, Iran was actively trying to export the Islamic Revolution. They admit that. But they also admit that by 1984, they had a realization. And I spoke to an Iranian Revolutionary Guard guy who was recruited in 79 during the street fighting, a young kid. I think he was like 17 at the time. And he got involved in, the street justice stuff. I mean, cleaning up the Mojahedin al-Khalq killing. He went to Kurdistan and suppressed the Kurds, and he earned the trust of the regime. So they sent him overseas, and I think he was operating out of Berlin or something like that, killing Kurds. He admits it. He said that's what we were doing. And then he got called back along with the other guys. And when they got back, they came down and the report, they were told, how do we refine this policy? And to a person, these fanatic Revolutionary Guard guys said, we have to relook our entire mindset when it comes to the West, because they do a lot of things right. We were living over there. And they do a lot of things right. Yes, we don't need the mini skirts. We don't need the porn shops. We don't need the alcohol. We don't need that. But these guys have a work ethic. They produce things that are nice. They have a nice society, a clean society. And we need to find a way to get that over here. We can't be isolated from these guys all that time. That's the Iranian mindset. Now, they have commonality. If you go and study what's going on in Lebanon, you'll know that the Shia clerics that came out of Iran settled in southern Lebanon. There was a close relationship between the southern Lebanese Shia communities and Iran. A lot of intermarriages took place so that when the Israelis rolled in and started subjecting southern Lebanon to occupation and depravity, that the Iranians made common cause with them, helped create Hezbollah. But the purpose of Hezbollah, remember, cause-effect relationship, ladies and gentlemen. Israel invaded southern Lebanon. Israel occupied southern Lebanon. And Hezbollah was created to kick Israel out, not to spread the revolution around the world, to kick Israel out. But suddenly Hezbollah becomes the aggressors because they're standing up to the real aggressors. The Houthi, again, Ansarallah movement. It's an offset of Shia. And the funny thing about it, and I keep saying the funny thing, there's nothing funny about religious differences, but they were actually for many years viewed by the Shia purists in Iran as heretics, because their variant of Shiism doesn't comport with that which being taught in the madrasas of Qom. So they were the heretics, but they made common cause because the Sunni Saudis invaded Lebanon. Again, I want to make the cause-effect relationship here quite clear. It wasn't that Iran went to Yemen and said, invade Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, with the blessing of the United States and with the help of its regional allies, invaded Yemen to defeat the Houthi. And so Iran came to their assistance and help them defend themselves. It's the same thing with the Shia militias in Iraq and in Syria. We're the ones that helped ISIS expand to the point that it could be seen as a direct threat to the al-Assad regime. Iran was invited in by the Syrian government to create popular resistance movements. We call them pro-Iranian militias, popular resistance movements among the tribes to defeat ISIS. Cause effect. Iran didn't go there for the purpose of expanding. They went there to defend. Iraq, the same thing. ISIS blows into Iraq, takes over 40% of Iraq, and the Iranians come in, create these resistance militias that help defeat ISIS, and now they exist. They don't exist to expand their power. They exist to protect their neighborhoods from bullies coming in. This is the reality. So that kid you showed is a big kid, strong kid, but he wasn't causing any trouble. He was just sitting there saying, I exist here. It was the little punk that came in and, hey, you, hey, you, hey, you. Well, what do you expect to happen then? Iran lives in a neighborhood where that little punk named Israel. And I don't know if did you see the United States in that video?
Oh, standing on the side watching, cheering.
And then after the end, when the little boy gets tossed, steps in between like, okay, enough's enough. And Iran's like, I could do you too, but I don't want to fight. I'll just walk away. But Israel has been running around the Middle East doing whatever it wants without any consequence, because Israel always said that we can punch you, and we got the United States to back us up back there. Because that kid wasn't going to punch that big kid unless he thought the United States was backing him up. Right. He thought that he had backup there, and if the big guy ever made a move, the big guy would come in and do it. So he's doing it. And that's Israel, just moving, punching without anything. Israel established what's called deterrence superiority, meaning that they had convinced the entire neighborhood, they had cowed the entire neighborhood into believing that if you ever hit Israel or attacked Israel's interests, we come in and it's hammer time. We take you down. It's going to hurt. And most nations fell for it. The Iranians were like, no. But Israel kept poking, assassinating scientists, blowing up nuclear facilities, blowing up Iranian warehouses in Syria, killing Iranian personnel in Lebanon and Syria, elsewhere in Iraq. And the big guys just sitting there going, come on, man, stop. I don't want, stop. But eventually, to make it stop, you have to flip the script and establish your own deterrence superiority. And so Iran waited, and which one of those punches set the big guy off? The last one.
All of them. Well,
I mean, they all got it up, but the last one, the guy went, that's it. The last punch that Israel delivered was taking down the consulate in Damascus. And Iran said, that's it. You can't ever touch us again, anywhere. It's not just Iran. You can't touch us anywhere. And if you do, we're pounding you. And the idiot didn't believe it, touched, and wham. What happened on April 14th was the whammy. But the thing is, that big kid didn't jump on top of the little kid and beat the living crap out of him. He threw him on the ground, made the demonstration, and then moved away. And that's what Iran did. They hit Israel. I want everybody to understand what happened on the 14th. Israel had some of the most heavily defended territory in the world from a ballistic missile defense standpoint. Not just their own capabilities, not just the capabilities they developed together with the United States, but the United States went ahead and rolled into it the totality of our ballistic missile defense capability. Specialized radars, the THAAD system, the advanced Patriots. We brought in our Aegis capable ships, parked them off, plugged them in to get their SM-3 missiles plugged into the overhead surveillance capability to detect, launch, track, supercomputers, and all the stuff. And we, here's the thing. This system that we put over Israel is the same one we told the Europeans, we got your back, guys. It's the same one we've told the Koreans and the South Koreans and the Japanese, we got your back. It's the same one we tell the Taiwanese, we got your back. We got you guys. Don't worry about this. We got this ballistic missile defense. And Iran went, no, you don't. And they came in, and Nevatim Air Base might be the most heavily defended spot on Earth. And the Iranians launched 7 missiles against the base. 5 of them hit their targets. All right. The Iranians proved that we can reach out and we can touch you anytime, any place we want to. And there's nothing you can do to stop us. And so now that they did that, the North Koreans are sitting there going, hey, we just developed a hypersonic missile that has the same maneuvering warhead capabilities, the same shotgun things. Hey, Japan, South Korea, guess what? We can hit you anytime we want to. And the Chinese are turning to the Taiwanese going, yeah, we got you anytime we want to. And the Russians now are leaning in on the Europeans going, remember, we told you we could get you anytime we want to? We can, because our missiles are even better than these guys. Ballistic missile defense has become overnight a hollow shell. It's I don't know how much everybody's spent over the years, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars. It might even approach $1 trillion down the toilet of life. It has always been the case. We knew that in 1972 when we signed the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. We knew that there's no such thing as ballistic missile defense. We knew it. Because what we learned back then is for every advancement you make in shooting a missile down, the other side just goes, oh, we got a new missile you can't shoot down. And then you go, we got an answer to that. We got a missile that can shoot your missile down. But we built a new one that's already deployed that you can't shoot down. The missile defense technology that we were testing in the we still have the ground-based interceptor, I guess they call it the GBI, and we've put some in Alaska, and we're talking about putting them elsewhere. It was designed to shoot down an SS-25 missile. That's a standard ballistic missile trajectory. Ballistic missile, everybody's like, Scott, all missiles are hypersonic. I had this the other day with an editor. All missiles are hypersonic. I said, you clearly don't know what hypersonic means. Hypersonic means speeds in excess of Mach 5 times the speed of sound. And a ballistic missile coming in, an ICBM coming in, is going easily 12 times the speed of sound. It's a hypersonic missile. I said, no, you missed the whole point. That is, parabolic physics. You launch it up, gravity takes over, and it just becomes, velocity, weight, speed, That's it. That's not a hypersonic missile. That's a ballistic missile. A hypersonic missile is not a ballistic missile. A hypersonic missile is a missile that takes off and then flattens out and takes a non-ballistic route to the target, moving at hypersonic speeds based upon the propulsion system that it has. That's a hypersonic missile. And for any air defense or ballistic missile system that has been designed to shoot down a ballistic missile, that's a missile that comes up, predictable trajectories. You can plot it out, the impact. A bullet hits a bullet, you're always told. Well, but what happens when the bullet takes off, goes at hypersonic speeds, and does little cute things like hiccups? Because again, you're tracking it, and then what happens? It slows down. And so you're like tracking. Oh, shoot, got to readjust. Speeds up again because it can hiccup, and then it maneuvers. Did you see the videos of the maneuvering warhead coming on the ground in Israel? Comes in, it made, they're going, it made one. I said, guys, it made 2 dips. It came in with dip, 2 adjustments. Did you see the one with the decoys?
No, I didn't see that one.
Oh, it's clever. They fire, it comes in and it fires out these decoys, and then the warhead actually decelerates because gravity and all this. Yeah. And so they fire out the decoys shoot ahead, accelerating ahead. The warhead slows down. The decoys come out, and all the Iron Dome comes in and starts going after the decoys. And then the warhead says, okay, ready? Hits their booster that's on the warhead, fires in, hits the target. I mean, these are technologies the Iranians have had for decades. This isn't the newest stuff. This isn't the newest technology. And they whipped up on them. They whipped up. The truth's coming out now about the target set. I mean, because I remember there's some people out there, they never hit Ramona. I said, yes, they did. And it turns out they hit Ramona Air Base. They hit Nevatim. They hit a command and control facility in Tel Aviv. Nobody's talking about it. But they hit that. They took out an intelligence site in the Golan. Nobody's talking about that. And they took out multiple ballistic missile defense sites. Multiple. And we saw that. So that the one with the maneuvering warhead, if you go back to that video, you'll see at the beginning, you'll see the Iron Dome launchers coming out of that point. That was an Iron Dome launch thing. And you saw Iron Dome coming out of here, and then there's a radar. All that 4 warheads came in and went pop, 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 pop. Took out all 4 Iron Dome sites. Just as a proof of concept to the Israelis, just to let them know we can do that to everything you got. We're just going to prove right now that this one little protected space you have, it ain't so protected. We took out all 4 of your Iron Dome. Israelis aren't talking about that. All they're talking about is a giant hole in the ground in Nevatim in the middle of their runway. That one thing hit, we filled it up and it's all repaired. But that's not the point. The point is it hit. You couldn't stop it. But in addition to hitting that, it hit 4 other locations on your base. Ramona got hit. They took out a command and control facility in Tel Aviv. The Israelis aren't talking about that. They're not talking about that.
Well, we got some breaking news, Scott, that definitely got some breaking news. Number 1, this is Al Mayadeen. Iran may alter nuclear doctrine amid Israeli threats to nuclear plants. A senior official in Iran's IRGC says that the Islamic Republic will repel any aggression on its nuclear facilities and deliver a response. The Islamic Republic of Iran may reconsider its nuclear doctrine amid growing Israeli threats to the country's nuclear plants, right? A senior official in the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps said on Thursday. Here's the other one. That's from Al Mayadeen, Press TV. If an IRGC official has warned that if Israel takes action against Iran's nuclear facilities, it will definitely face tit-for-tat retaliation against the regime's nuclear centers with advanced weapons. If the Zionist regime decides to take action against our nuclear facilities and centers, it will definitely face our reaction, adding, for a tit-for-tat retaliation, the regime's nuclear facilities will be attacked with advanced weapons. Here's the issue. Iranians are buried deep in mountains, all of their important stuff, right? Israel felt that the Iron Dome could protect them, that the U.S. could protect them. Their stuff is sitting right out in the open. And Iran is now saying, you want to hit our nuclear facilities? We'll hit yours. right? You want to come after us? You're threatening us with nuclear weapons. You keep threatening us, we'll build nuclear weapons. But looking at Iran's technology, it wouldn't take them long if they chose to. So now all of this crap every other week of Benjamin Netanyahu holding up a picture of a bomb that looks like something that it was made by Acme on like one of these Roadrunner cartoons. They're saying you don't have to play that anymore. We'll do it. You're going to push us to do it, but we don't want to do it. They're changing the game here. And they're saying you hit our nuclear facilities, we hit yours. The total different thing. Your thoughts of the importance of this breaking news about Ritter?
Well, I have to
and you can kind of see this coming. You can kind of see this coming.
Yeah, I have to update an article that I was in the process of writing. But the premise of my article is that given what happened, and given Israel's inability to stop the cycle of escalation, the logical conclusion of a tit-for-tat exchange between Iran and Israel is, you basically are talking about deterrence escalation. What do I have? Okay, Israel said we have deterrence superiority. Iran just proved that they have it. Now Israel, to respond, is going to have to do something to Iran that says we can hurt you more than you can hurt us. So Israel strikes maybe Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Iran says, no, we can hurt you as much or more than you hurt us, and they strike Israel's nuclear. But now you're touching the very thing that gives Israel life sustainability, their nuclear deterrence. And so now what does Israel do? And we know on at least two occasions, we know what Israel will do. They in the past, when they've talking about, because there's a deal, there's a secret deal. It's not so secret anymore because it's been released, but between Nixon and the Israelis, where the Israelis, the Nixon administration was saying, you can't have a nuclear weapons program. We have this non-proliferation treaty we're getting ready to sign. And by law, we're not allowed to do any business with you if you're a nuclear proliferator. There's only, 5 acknowledged nuclear powers. Anybody beyond that doesn't get nuclear weapons. That's the way the treaty's built. We just signed it. Senate ratified it. It's in, so you can't have a nuclear weapons program. The Israelis went, well, we have to have a nuclear weapons program. And so the deal was, rather than us saying, well, we got to go to war against you then, because ultimately that's what we would have to do. We said, okay, but you're not allowed to talk about it. It's going to be one of those capabilities that's there, but no, you never talk about it. And that was okay back then, because then it was just speculation. But then Vanunu, you remember Mr. Vanunu, defected or left, and he published the photographs that proves that Israel has nuclear weapons. So now they just said, you can't talk about it. You can't talk about it. The moment they talk about it, the moment Israel acknowledges having nuclear weapons, we're in trouble, because the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty will cease to exist if we don't enforce it. It'll fall apart. And so Israel has said, because they have to operate that, they just can't come right out and use nuclear weapons. The first thing Israel will do is they will say, we have nuclear weapons. The next thing they'll do is they will test a nuclear weapon. The next thing they will do is there will be a demonstration of a nuclear weapon above ground. And then the last thing they'll do is use the nuclear weapon. And we are headed in that direction. And the Iranians know exactly what I just told you. The Iranians are some of the smartest people on the planet. They were willing to live with a Israeli nuclear deterrence so long as the Israelis didn't acknowledge it and didn't take any movement on it. But what's happening now, that could happen when Israel had conventional deterrent supremacy. But because Israel abused that, Iran has established conventional deterrent supremacy. And so now the only chance Israel has now is to begin a cycle of escalation that will ultimately lead to Israel declaring its nuclear weapons program. And we don't want that. That's not what we want. I was afraid of this because, again, I'm not a theocratic scholar. I'm not. I've always said, though, that the fatwa issued by not just one Ayatollah, but two consecutive, the only two grand Ayatollahs that have governed the theocracy, was real. And it was real. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. and they've said that nuclear weapons are incompatible with Islam. But there are Islamic scholars that have talked about, especially in the Shia faith, especially the way the Iranians do it. I know I'm getting in the weeds here. Do you have time?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I got another 20 minutes.
Because this is sort of important to understand this. Because
sort of
people don't understand how Iran works. They keep talking about it being a theocracy. It's actually more of a democracy than you know. To become a grand Ayatollah, first of all, you have to study religion forever. It's like a 30-year PhD program, and you have to know the Quran, you have to know the Hadiths, you have to know everything inside and out. And then you write a thesis, and I forget what they call it. It begins with a T, but it's a thesis that you put out there that says, this is my religious philosophy. This is the religion that I've learned, how I apply it to an aspect of life. And it's put out there. And now people read it. And then you're tasked with performing creating a marja, which is a following. It's like in the Catholic Church, they call it a diocese. In Protestants, it's a congregation. But you're going to create a marja, a school, where people come to you and view you as a known, esteemed religious authority who, when you say things, it carries the weight of God. But if you write a thesis that nobody likes, you don't get a marja. Everybody goes, right. You're out of here. Or you write it, they like it, but then they see how you implement it, you're out of there. The point is, living Islam in the Shia faith as practiced by the Iranians, is a living component that takes into account modern realities, so that religious thinking that may have been applicable 100 years ago must be updated to take into account the realities of modern life. And they're that flexible on that. And that same philosophy that allows for a reconsideration of things that might have been hammam 100 years ago, but now must be permitted with guidance today because of the changing society. That philosophy, unfortunately, can create the conditions where a fatwa issued by the Ayatollah of rock and roll is no longer deemed to be pertinent. That society has advanced, situations have advanced where the fatwa must be reconsidered in the context of what's best for the faith. And if Israel is threatening Iran with nuclear weapons,
which they have,
and which they will be doing, that fatwa can be reconsidered. This is very, very serious, because for all the people, and I've been on the side saying Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, and I'm very comfortable with that. But I've also been on the side saying that, the fatwa is absolute, that the Iranians are serious about that. But I've always in the back of my mind had that little caveat, but
don't threaten them too much. Nobody is going to allow you to wipe out their society.
And here's the thing. The Iranians may not have a nuclear weapons program, but they ain't stupid. They've accomplished the hardest part, and that is the fizzle. And they have sufficient fizzle, just so everybody knows that when people out there saying they have sufficient fizzle to produce a number of atomic bombs in a matter of days.
Probably. Quickly they do it.
If they want to hit the on switch right now, they can take this 60%, it's still considered low enriched uranium, and rapidly turn it into 98% enriched fissile material suitable for nuclear weapon. The metallurgy involved is not, these are people who have dealt with uranium metal to make plates that they used for fuel, so they know how to convert uranium into metal. The plates they made had 23% enriched uranium because that's what you use for the fuel. They'll just learn how to turn 98% uranium into metal. A gun design is one of the most basic designs in the world. They don't have to go through the whole thing of an implosion device, but they could. But a gun design will work. You give me enough uranium, you fashion into a gun design. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. You may not get 100%, activization of the nuclear potential, but all you need for it to do is go off at 70%, and you've lost an Israeli city. So guess what, Israel? Congratulations, you idiots. You've just guaranteed that you have lost nuclear deterrence. It's gone. It's the same stupidity I tell the United States about North Korea. This is why I'm so furious at Joe Biden, because Donald Trump was moving us in a direction where we could have eliminated down the road with the right guarantees North Korea's nuclear weapons. They're there forever now. They're there forever. They are never going to trust the United States, Japan, South Korea ever again. And once Iran gets nuclear weapons, they're never going to get rid of them.
No.
Because they can't trust anybody. So this is the direction we're heading right now. This is a very, very dangerous scenario, because the Israelis have always said the one thing, and the United States has said the one thing that will push us over that line is Iran getting nuclear weapons. But the United States has never had to deal with, we've always talked about a year breakout scenario. Now what happens when you have a breakout scenario that's measured in days and you don't know what's happening? These weapons could happen now, and
they could already have them.
They could already.
They could have already.
God, I hope not, but they
could.
Now,
I don't mean have them. Here's what I mean. If I'm Iran, and Israel has already threatened. They said, well, if the U.S. doesn't give us weapons to fight Iran, they said this: we'll just use whatever we have. Wink, wink. Now, Iran may not have them. I put everything together. Look, I got a kit, right? I used to do kit, models when I was a kid. You got all the parts for the kit. You set all the parts right there. And if you need to, you stick them together quickly. If you get to a point and you're saying, look, let's say they do something, they hit back and forth, and Israel says, if you do anything else, we're going to nuke you. And Iran says, all right, fine. But we're going to have a nuclear weapon within 2 days, or we got one ready, or you're going to get nuked too. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're this close, if you're Iran, do you wait around knowing where you are if there ever was a time? I'm not saying. Now, we also know this. Iran has conventional weapons that can wipe out, conventional missiles that can wipe out. But that deterrent, that threat, it's like Israel doesn't get it. I think we're in a different place, but from the perspective of Iran, it just, unfortunately, it's logical what they're doing, Scott.
Well, no, I agree. And here's the thing. I agree with you. I look, if I were an Iranian right now, the nuclear program that I would be seeking to imitate is South Africa's. It's a very simple, functional nuclear weapons design. You don't have to get into, thermonuclear, stuff. It's not a hydrogen bomb. It's not even an implosion weapon. An implosion weapon is designed to create a critical mass that makes maximum potential of the fissile material. But a gun weapon, you're not going to get maximum potential. You're going to get some potential. It's going to go boom in a big way. It's going to be very dirty, by the way. It's going to contaminate a lot. Israel probably doesn't want this to happen to it, but it's going to happen to it. Visit Tel Aviv now, ladies and gentlemen, because you may not be able to for the next 1,000 years if Iran drops us. But with the gun design, it's already there. It's not like the Iranians have to go in and reinvent the wheel. The wheel's been built. The designs are out there. They exist. So if I were the Iranians, I would already have the shells laid out that can take my gun system, and I would have already designed the gun system so that all I have to do is produce the fissile material, machine it to the proper dimensions, plug in the main body, plug in the bolt, set it, load it up, and it can fire. And again, let's say it takes 4 days to create fissile material. It takes another week to convert it to metal and machine it down. In 2 weeks, Iran can have a gun-style nuclear weapon on a missile that is guaranteed to hit the target it's aimed at, because they already proved it. So no missile defense system is going to save you on this one.
Because it's going to have 5,000 drones ahead of it. 5,000 drones come in, disable your system. You know what I mean?
they may not even use drones next time. They'll just use 5,000 missiles.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a very dangerous situation. I have to tell you that news actually depressed me very much,
It's
because
horrifying.
it heads us down a path that where nuclear weapons stop being theoretical, stop being a matter of academic interest, and it just becomes straight up insanity. And Israel has proven itself to be an absolutely insane nation. The Iranians, I always believed, were rational, but when you push people into a corner, the rationality goes out the window. And when people are dealing with existential threats to their existence, they'll do whatever it takes to survive. And I don't want to. I really don't want to live in this world like this. I'm not talking about committing suicide. I'm just saying it's depressing
You
to
want
live
things
in
to
a
be
world
different.
like this. And so, I'm a guy who's believed in arms control. I lived this at one time in my life. Not just the ever ready presence of nuclear weapons, but what I believed was going to be the inevitability of their use. When I was in the Marine Corps, to me, it was inevitable that these weapons would be used. But then we found a way to get rid of them. We have to make arms control our number one priority in the Middle East right now. This is literally a game-changing moment. We need to nip this in the bud, and the only way you nip this in the bud is to put Israel's nuclear weapons on the table right now and say, no, you don't get to use them. You don't get to have them. We're coming in and we're taking them away from you. This thing has gotten out of control. And then we turn to the Iranians and say, if we do that, we're coming back in to make sure you never have them either. This is not a we get rid of Israel and you get to do whatever you want. This is a come to Jesus moment for everybody. We have decided that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty actually means something. And we're going to start not only getting rid of your stuff, but Russia, China, Great Britain, France. We have to live up to the promise of the original Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We have to get rid of ours too. It's time for nuclear weapons to get the hell out of Dodge. They can't be part of anybody's national security strategy going forward, because there's no such thing as a responsible nation possessing them. Everybody in America, like, we're responsible. We're the most irresponsible nation out there. We should be the first nation to be disarmed because we're insane. But now the Israelis have shown to be a little bit more crazy than us. Now the Iranians are getting the crazy club. The North Koreans are in the crazy club. India's in the crazy club. Pakistan's in the crazy club. We got to get rid of we got to get serious about this now. It can't just be theoretical down the road. We have to turn into pariahs. Anybody who advocates for nuclear weapons, anybody. We have right now all these think tanks in Washington, D.C. that write these papers. You got an organization called the Arms Control Association. All right. Their job is supposed to be arms control. And yet they're the biggest advocates for American nuclear supremacy in the world. Arms control only means that we get to keep them. We get rid of everybody else's. That's not arms control, ladies and gentlemen. That's hegemony, nuclear hegemony. And that's why other nations have nuclear weapons, because of policies like ours. Yeah. So we got to change the script. I'm deeply depressed right now.
Yeah, well, I think too, as horrifying as it is, this is an opportunity for for Russia and China and some other countries to now go into the UNSC, to now go in the UN and say, guys, we got to have a serious talk. You know what I mean? It's time for them to go in and say, we got to have a serious talk. And maybe the threat, because let's face it, what Iran's also said, because everybody felt like this also, and I know we didn't say it, in the back of our mind, there was this feeling, you know what? If the U.S. picks a fight with Iran and then Iran flattens every stinking base in the Middle East, then the U.S. is going to threaten Iran with nuclear weapons. We didn't say that. It was unspoken, but everybody knew it. And I think Iran is saying, look, all of those days are over. We're not going to be threatened like that. And if you threaten people, what the hell? If I say I'm going to come to your house and shoot you, you're going to think about how you can get a gun to protect yourself. Now,
and I'm going to go to the range and learn how to use that gun.
Exactly. Now is an opportunity for Russia and China, et cetera, to go to the UNSC and say, look, you guys love Israel. NATO, you love Israel. We don't want to see them wiped off the map. There's only one way to fix this. We don't want to see this thing expand. We got to talk. You know, while the U.S. empire is unreasonable, maybe a threat now. And here's the other thing they know. They always said this: if we thought Iran was close to nuclear weapons, we'd go in and attack Iran immediately and take it all out. Well, now they know that ain't an option. right? So Iran can say that because they know just going in, taking it. No, that's not an option. So now there is an opportunity here, I think. But at any rate, Scott, I got to run. We got big things going on now that we've depressed the world, horrified ourselves. But but we can look at this as a positive in that there is now an opportunity for the people who are responsible to utilize this to make some positive changes. Scott, everybody, don't forget, go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com. That's Scott Ritter's website. And all of his good work is there. When you go to scottritterextra.com, make sure that you support him financially, that you donate and help keep Scott going. He's got a lot of things going on. He's doing a lot of work, right, on bringing peace, bringing good relationships between the U.S. and Russia. Hey, that stuff costs money. He's got a family to feed. Maverick's running around there barking somewhere, looking for his next treat. Everybody's hungry. ScottRitterExtra.com. Make sure you donate when you get there. As I said before, if you can't afford to donate, which a lot of us can't, simply share ScottRitterExtra.com on all your social media platforms and put on there, please go to this website and donate to help Scott keep going. Scott's very important. He's a critical part of the peace movement worldwide, and we can all do whatever we can to keep it going. Share this on all your social media platforms. If you can donate here, fine, whatever. If you can't, whatever, same thing. Share it on all your social media platforms. Peace. We're out.